Hello, and welcome to... Today we're talking about another card from Jumpstart. Bruvac, the Grandiloquent Granddaddy Mill. For 2 and a blue, you get a 1/4 legendary human advisor that says if an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, instead they mill twice that many cards. So, that means if you can mill half your opponent's deck, you actually mill the whole thing. Unsurprisingly, there are already 2 cards that mill half an opponent's deck: Traumatize and Fleet Swallower. Traumatize is a 5-cost sorcery that mills half an opponent's deck rounded down. Fleet Swallower is a 7-cost 6/6 fish that mills half a deck rounded up whenever it attacks. Now, rounding up and down actually can make a difference. With Granddaddy Mill out, Fleet Swallower will mill anybody completely because it rounds up, but Traumatize will only completely mill out an opponent if that player has an even amount of cards in their deck. If they have an odd number, they'll be left with 1 card in their deck since you rounded down, which means they'll still survive on their draw step. And just an FYI, fraying sanity also combos with Traumatize and Fleet Swallower. Fraying sanity is an interesting card. For 2 and a blue, you can enchant a player, and at the end of each turn, they mill X cards, where X is the number of cards that were put into their graveyard this turn. Now, this has an interesting effect with Bruvac. The amount you make someone mill will double because of Bruvac, and then at the end of turn, it will double again because of fraying sanity. So, the opponent will mill 4 times what they were initially going to mill, and the total number of cards milled that turn will be 6 times what you initially milled them for. Here's some quick math. Say you draw a card with Psychic Corrosion, making each opponent mill 2, but they really mill 4 because of Bruvac. Now at the end of turn, the cursed player mills 4 cards with fraying sanity because 4 cards hit their graveyard this turn, but Bruvac makes them mill 8 cards instead. 4 times the initial 2 you made them mill, and a grand total of 12 cards in 1 turn, or 6 times more than the initial 2 you were going to make them mill. Granddaddy Mill can actually make the numbers game pretty intense. Let's look at some Jank interactions with mill creatures and Rite of Replication. Rite of Replication is a sorcery that makes a token of a creature, but if you kick it for 5 additional mana, you make 5 tokens of said creature instead. So if you target a creature like Sphinx Mindbreaker that makes each opponent mill 10 cards when it enters the battlefield, you get 5 Sphinxes that make each opponent mill 10 cards, or 50 cards total. But if you have Bruvac out, that doubles to 100 cards milled for each opponent. But let's do some even crazier math after this small plug. If you like this video so far, consider hitting the like button, and if you like the rest of the video, you can always sub for more janky combos. Only about 15% of my viewers are subbed. I don't normally like asking for this, but I find a gentle reminder does improve my growth. Anyways, onto the crazy math. Sage Road Denizen is a creature that says whenever another blue creature enters the battlefield, target player mills 2 cards. So if you have Granddaddy Mill out and you kick Rite of Replication, targeting the Denizen, you get 5 copies of it. Now, the non-token one sees all 5 blue tokens enter, so you get 5 triggers to make a player mill 2 cards. But really, 4 cards thanks to Bruvac. So you can make players mill a total of 20 cards in groups of 4 from this one Denizen. But now for the tokens. Well, each of them see the other 4 enter because they don't count themselves, entering for mill purposes. So each token can dole out 4 groups of 4 card mills, or 16 cards total in groups of 4. And all 5 tokens get this number to make people mill. So from doing this copy spell, you get to mill 100 cards across the table in groups of 4 cards each. But we can get even crazier. Halimar Excavator is an ally that says whenever it or another ally enters the battlefield, target player mills X cards, where X is the number of allies you control. So, the same setup. Bruvac and 1 Excavator, and a kick Rite of Replication targeting it to make 5 Excavator tokens. So each Excavator sees all 5 tokens entering, which means they each get 5 triggers, 1 for each ally entering. When each trigger resolves, target player mills 6 cards, because you control 6 allies, but it's really 12 cards thanks to Bruvac. So, you have a total of 6 excavators that can make a player mill 12 cards 5 times each, or a grand total of 360 cards milled across the table in 30 groups of 12. I think that's game over in a 4-player game. Multiple copies of Granddaddy Mill can also make the game quite crazy. Now, Bruvac is legendary, so you can't create copies of him without needing to get rid of one. However, there are ways to get around this rule. Cards like Sakashima the Imposter and Spark Double can enter as copies of Bruvac and not trigger the legendary rule, while Mirror Gallery actually shuts down the legendary rule, and Helm of the Host will create a non-legendary token of Bruvac at the beginning of combat when it's equipped. If you copy these non-legendary tokens continually, the amount your opponents need to mill exponentially increases. 2 Bruvacs is 4 times the millage, 3 Bruvacs is 8 times, 4 Bruvacs is 16 times, etc, etc. It gets quite crazy. But finally, Bruvac has made 2 good cards even better. Sphinx's Tutelage and Grindstone. Sphinx's Toot says whenever you draw a card, target player mills 2 cards. If both cards were non-land cards that share a color, repeat this process. And Grindstone says pay 3 and tap it for the same effect as Sphinx's Tutelage. Well, with mill now being a keyword, the ruling on these cards changes a bit. Now they say, target player mills 2 cards. If 2 cards that share a color were milled this way, repeat the process. Now that might not seem like a big change, but it is when you're using Bruvac. Since mill is doubled now, Sphinx's Tutelage and Grindstone checks all 4 cards to see if any 2 of those cards share a color. And if they do, your opponent will need to mill another 4 cards and check to see if any of those 2 share a color. You have much higher odds of hitting 2 out of 4 cards of the same color than 2 out of 2. Anyways, these were some combos with Bruvac, the granddaddy of mill. Are you going to use Bruvac? Make a nice little mono blue mill EDH deck? Let me know down below, and when you need another combo, come back here to Combo Breakdown.